It was almost midnight when I got out of bed for a glass of water. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I walked past Colin's office, thinking he'd fallen asleep watching stock videos again. Then I heard his voice. "Yeah, Mom," he said, his tone casual, like he was talking about a bad movie. "She eats like a pig. I can't even look at her anymore." I froze. My hand still held the glass. Vivian's voice came through the speaker, soft and venomous. "Be patient, darling. 6 more months, and that prenup expires. Then everything she built is yours." My fingers tightened until I heard the glass creak. They kept talking like I wasn't real, like I was a problem they were managing. Colin laughed. "Trust me, Mom. I've been pretending long enough." For a moment, my mind went blank. Then everything slowed down. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. It was more like the final click in a puzzle that suddenly made sense. All those business trips, the late-night texts he'd hide, the way Vivian smiled at me like she was looking through me, not at me. I walked back to the kitchen, filled the glass, and sat down at the dining table. The clock on the wall read 12:14 a.m. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at the reflection of the kitchen light in my water and whispered, 6 months. 6 months until the prenup expired. 6 months before everything I worked for could become his. 6 months to take it all back. The next morning, Colin was cheerful. He kissed my cheek and asked if I slept well. I smiled. "Perfectly," I said. He didn't notice the way I looked at him. People rarely do when they assume you're harmless. While he drove off to his client meeting, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the name of my company on the screen. Barnes Sustainable Developments. Every inch of it, every design, every deal was mine. I had built it from the ground up while he played the charming husband. That morning, I created a new folder on my desktop and named it Exit Plan. Inside it, I wrote one sentence. "If he thinks I'm his meal ticket, he's about to choke." I spent the rest of the morning replaying his words in my head. Fat pig. It didn't sting the way he probably imagined. If anything, it gave me energy. Because when a man insults you to his mother, he's already too weak to face you himself. By noon, I'd already emailed my accountant for a private consultation. By evening, I'd called my lawyer, Danielle Cruz, an old college friend who knew my business better than anyone. She answered on the first ring. "Olivia, what's wrong?" I took a breath. I need to know how to make sure my husband never touches a dollar of what's mine. There was silence. Then Danielle said, "That bad?" "Worse," I replied. "But he doesn't know I know, and that's how I plan to keep it." That night, I cooked dinner like usual. Colin came home smelling like expensive whiskey and confidence. He sat down, kissed the air near my face, and said, "Smells great, babe." He smiled. "Thanks." We ate in silence for a while, the sound of his fork scraping the plate louder than it should have been. Then he started talking about a new investment opportunity. A tech startup run by a guy he met at the golf club. He said words like equity and potential growth. I heard excuse and money pit. I nodded at all the right moments, like a polite audience member in a bad play. When dinner was over, I loaded the dishwasher, and he poured himself another drink. He looked relaxed, too relaxed. The kind of comfort you only feel when you believe the person across from you is still in the dark. Before bed, I checked the door to his office. It was slightly open. His laptop screen glowed faintly. I stood there, just long enough to see a message notification flash across the screen. "Kelsey, missed you already." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I simply turned off the light and closed the door. That night, while he slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, mapping out my next steps. He had 6 months before that prenup expired. But so did I. And the difference was, I knew it. I wasn't going to scream or beg or try to win his attention. I was going to plan, quietly, efficiently, and with every ounce of patience he thought I didn't have. When people talk about revenge, they imagine rage. I've learned that the most dangerous kind is the calm one. The kind that smiles across the dinner table and says, "Of course, honey," while setting the chessboard. And that's exactly what I did. Before we move on, I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever smiled through something you shouldn't have? Tell me in the comments below. And if you like true cheating stories, revenge stories, and quiet justice after husband betrayal, make sure to subscribe. The next morning came fast, and with it, the first move in my 6-month game. The coffee pot hissed before sunrise, and the sound made me smile. Colin hated when I woke up early. It interrupted his illusion that I revolved around him. I stood by the window in my robe, watching the fog settle over the street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I felt focused. By the time he stumbled into the kitchen, still half asleep, I was typing notes on my laptop. "Morning, babe," he said, voice thick from sleep. He leaned in for a kiss. I didn't move. He didn't notice. "Got an early call with the site team," I said, eyes on the screen. He poured coffee, added too much sugar he always did, and started scrolling his phone. "My mom said we should have dinner this weekend," he mumbled. "She misses you." That was almost funny. Vivian missed me the way a vulture misses roadkill. I just smiled and said, "Sure." He nodded like we'd agreed on something important, then walked away. When the front door closed, I exhaled. Silence again. The kind that used to feel lonely but now felt like strategy. I opened my private email, the one Colin didn't know existed, and found Danielle's message. Subject: Options. Body: We need to talk in person, and we'll need to move fast. Perfect. I got dressed, business as usual. Cream blazer, navy slacks, hair tied back, every inch the woman who had her life under control. And I did, finally. Just not in the way Colin imagined. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in Danielle's downtown office. She looked the same as always, sharp, calm, a woman who could destroy you in court while drinking chamomile tea. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her. Every word I'd heard through that door. The prenup clause, the mother-in-law, the fake affection. She listened quietly, jotting down notes. When I finished, she leaned back. "Olivia, you're sitting on a time bomb. If that prenup expires, he's entitled to half your assets. You can't let him file first." "I won't," I said. "Good. So we restructure." She explained the plan like she was describing a kitchen renovation. Simple, clean, ruthless. Move the company's equity into a trust. Reinvest personal assets into business holdings. Transfer the deed of the house into corporate property. All legal, all strategic. By the time she finished, I was already 10 steps ahead. "How soon can we start?" "Today," she said. "But he'll notice changes in the bank accounts." "Let him. I'll say it's for a new development project. He never listens long enough to understand details anyway." Danielle gave a small smile. "He sounds lazy." "He's worse than lazy," I said. "He's comfortable." On the drive back, I thought about that word comfortable. That's what cheating men are before they fall. Too comfortable to see the setup. When I got home, Colin was sitting on the couch in sweatpants, playing some game on his phone. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. "Productive," I said, setting my laptop bag on the counter. He grinned at his screen. "Great. I'm meeting Tyler for lunch tomorrow. Don't wait for me." "Wouldn't dream of it." He didn't hear the tone. He never did. That night, I cooked lasagna, his favorite. I even poured him a glass of the overpriced wine he'd bragged about to his friends. He thought it meant everything was fine. While he talked about some imaginary deal with his brother, I watched his hands, the way he gestured when he lied, the way his smile faltered when he felt unseen. For a man who thought he was clever, he was painfully transparent. After dinner, I cleaned up while he watched a movie. He laughed out loud a few times, like life was good. And in a way, it was. Just not for him. Around midnight, I walked out to the balcony. The air smelled like rain. My phone buzzed Danielle again. "Trust setup begins Monday. Don't move any large funds this week. We'll do it quietly." Have. I stared at the message and felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Something steadier. Colin wasn't my heartbreak anymore. He was my project. When I came back inside, he was asleep on the couch, the TV still flickering. I watched him for a long moment, the same man who once made me laugh so hard I cried. The same man who whispered love like it was oxygen. Now he just looked small. I turned off the TV, threw a blanket over him, and whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby. You'll need them. The next morning, I met with my financial advisor under the pretense of a business expansion. We discussed moving my investments into more protected structures. He didn't ask why. People rarely question women who sound confident with numbers. By the afternoon, I had lunch with my project manager, reviewed blueprints, signed a few invoices routine, ordinary, invisible. And that was the point. Every move I made was quiet. Every signature looked innocent. Every dollar had purpose. When Colin called that evening, asking if I could wire money for a short-term investment, I said sweetly, "Of course, just send me the details." He never did. That night, I sat at my desk with a cup of tea and opened a fresh document titled Week 2. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. I typed the first line. "Never rush revenge. It's better when they don't see it coming. The kettle clicked off behind me, and for a second, I just listened to the quiet hum of my house. My house. The one he thought he'd own someday. And that's when I realized I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't even love him. I was just done pretending either mattered. The storm outside began to rise, thunder rolling somewhere beyond the trees. But inside, everything was calm, measured, and beautifully under control. The rain hadn't stopped all morning. It hit the office windows hard enough to blur the skyline, and for a moment, I found it beautiful. Colin always said rainy days made him unproductive. For me, they meant focus. I leaned back in my chair, scrolling through spreadsheets, my coffee gone cold. Everything I built, contracts, properties, partnerships, was lined up in neat rows of numbers. $13 million worth of hard work. And all he saw was a payout waiting to happen. Danielle's voice from our meeting echoed in my head. He can't touch what he can't find. So I started moving pieces. Not dramatic, not reckless, quietly, like shuffling cards in a deck no one else was watching. At 11 a.m., I called my accountant, Victor Lane. He'd handled my finances since my first real estate flip in Austin 8 years ago. Straightforward, discreet, allergic to gossip. "Victor, I need a few restructuring options," I said. He cleared his throat. "Expansion again, or protection? Let's call it insurance." He paused, then said softly, "How soon do you need it?" "Yesterday." We scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. When I got home to grab some files, Colin was in the kitchen, talking loudly on speakerphone. His mother's voice came through, full of that brittle sweetness she used like perfume. "She's so lucky to have you, Colin. No one else would tolerate a woman like that." He chuckled. "Yeah, well, let's just say I've earned my patience." I froze in the hallway, that same chill crawling up my spine. He had no idea I was there. I turned around and walked back out without a sound. At Victor's office, I sat across from him while he pulled up my accounts. "You've got more liquidity than most small companies," he said. "Where do you want it to go?" "I want every dollar to disappear legally." He smiled. "You're talking my language." We discussed asset trusts, corporate subsidiaries, and reallocation strategies. I wasn't hiding my money. I was protecting it from stupidity. His, specifically. "Make it look boring," I said. "Bureaucratic. Something a man like Colin would never have the patience to read." Victor chuckled. "I can do that." By the end of the meeting, everything was in motion. My money was becoming smoke, visible only to those who knew where to look. That night, Colin poured wine while I pretended to scroll Zillow. "Babe," he said, "did you ever think about selling this place?" My fingers froze. "Why?" "Just thinking ahead, you know. It's a good time to cash out, maybe upgrade." "Upgrade?" He smiled like he was sharing a secret. "We've done well. You've done well. I think we should enjoy it more. Bigger house, bigger life." I looked at him for a long second, then said, "You're right. We should enjoy it while it lasts." And he raised his glass, completely missing the meaning. Later that evening, I sat in the study reviewing old emails, the ones that told the story of our marriage better than any anniversary card. His early messages were full of enthusiasm and fake admiration, compliments about my drive, my independence, things he now mocked when his mother was listening. Halfway through reading, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was fascinated. It was like studying an animal that camouflaged itself for survival. The manipulation was detailed, patient, methodical. He'd waited years, pretending, watching, timing the moment I'd finally let my guard down. But he'd miscalculated something. I was patient, too. By midnight, the documents from Victor arrived in my inbox, legal drafts, outlining transfers, holdings, and ownership structures. I read every word twice. Everything was airtight. Colin came in wearing his usual smug smile. "Still working?" "Always," I said without looking up. "You should relax more," he teased. "Money isn't everything." I looked at him over the top of my glasses. "You'd know." He laughed, kissed my head, and walked out. I watched him go, wondering if he even realized how transparent he was. He thought he was playing poker while I was running the casino. The next day, I met Danielle again to finalize signatures. She reviewed the trust agreements, flipping through each page like a conductor checking notes. "This," she said, tapping the documents, "is what freedom looks like on paper." "Not yet," I said, "but it's a start." When I got home that evening, Colin was on the patio, grilling steaks, humming off-key. He looked relaxed, happy, confident in his fake kingdom. He handed me a glass of wine. "You've been tense lately. Everything okay?" I smiled and leaned against the doorframe. "Better than ever." "Oh." He nodded, satisfied with that answer, and turned back to the grill. I watched him flip the meat, the flames lighting his face in flashes. It was strange to think how much energy I'd wasted trying to make him feel loved. Now, all I felt was clarity. After dinner, he kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't stay up too late with your spreadsheets." "Don't worry," I said. "The numbers are all in order." And they were. While he slept that night, I sat in my office, watching the rain streak the glass. Every drop felt like a countdown. 6 months until the prenup expired. 6 months before he tried to cash out on me. The clock was ticking, but not the way he thought. Each day that passed, I was one move closer to checkmate. And the best part was, he still believed he was winning. The smell of fresh paint filled the kitchen the next morning. Colin had hired painters to brighten the space, which really meant impressing his golf buddies during the next dinner party. He loved appearances, clean, polished, fake. It matched him perfectly. I stood by the counter, stirring sugar into my coffee, while he scrolled through his phone. "The new color looks good, doesn't it?" he asked, not looking up. "It's perfect," I said. "Just like us." He laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. By now, the house felt like a stage set. Every morning, I played the part, smiling, listening, pretending to care about his half-baked business ideas. But in my head, I was running calculations, planning my next move. I'd already shifted ownership of 2 investment properties to my company. One more transfer, and Colin's marital estate would shrink to the size of his ego. Danielle had handled it discreetly. "Keep it calm," she told me. "He can't know you're preparing." I had no problem with that. Acting calm was my specialty. One afternoon, he brought home flowers. Something he hadn't done in years. "For you," he said, grinning. "Thought I'd surprise you." I took them, smiled sweetly, and said, "How thoughtful." Inside, I wondered if his mother had told him to do it. Vivian liked to play the long game, too. A few days later, she invited us to her house for brunch. Her estate in Oldham County looked like a museum dedicated to herself. Marble floors, family portraits larger than life, chandeliers that screamed insecurity. She greeted me with air kisses and a syrupy smile. "Olivia, darling, you look radiant. Marriage suits you." "Yes," I said lightly. "It's all about management." She led us to the dining room, where the table was already set with fine china and enough food for 10 people. Colin started bragging about a deal. He was working on some vague business venture with his brother Tyler. Vivian listened like he was pitching a billion-dollar company. "Oh, my brilliant son," she said, patting his hand. "Always the visionary." I watched them together, mother and son, 2 actors rehearsing the same scene. The adoring parent, the misunderstood genius. Neither of them saw the cracks forming. When she turned to me, her voice softened into something that sounded almost genuine. "You've been such a good influence on him, Olivia. I can tell he's calmer these days." "I'm glad," I said, Peace is good for the soul. Her smile faltered for half a second, as if she suspected something in my tone. Then she recovered, passing me the fruit platter like we were best friends. Later, while Colin stepped outside to take a call, she leaned closer. You know, dear, marriage takes patience, especially with a man like Colin. He's passionate, he has vision, but he needs a woman who knows how to make him feel important. I sipped my coffee slowly. He's lucky then. She blinked, unsure if that was agreement or insult. I smiled. When we left, Colin said, "That went well." "It did," I replied. "She's charming." Back home, he fell asleep watching TV while I reviewed paperwork for the downtown development project. I signed 2 contracts, scheduled meetings, and emailed my assistant instructions for Monday. My business was thriving. My marriage, meanwhile, was a product I'd already decided to phase out. At work, people called me unshakable. They had no idea how literal that had become. I kept my focus sharp, my emotions clean. I had no room for anger, not yet. Only strategy. That week, I met with Victor again. He'd finalized the new holding structure. "It's all set," he said, sliding the documents across his desk. "Once these signatures are processed, everything moves into the trust automatically." "Good," I said. "And if my husband asks questions?" He smiled. "Tell him it's for tax efficiency. No man alive argues with that." "Oh." When I got home, Colin was waiting on the porch with 2 glasses of wine. He handed me one. "We never spend time together anymore," he said, trying to sound tender. I took a sip. "We're spending time right now." He frowned. "You know what I mean." "Do I?" I asked softly. He looked confused, like the words didn't match the expression on my face. Then he forced a smile. "You're in one of your moods." "Maybe," I said. "But it's nothing you can fix." He didn't ask what I meant, because Colin avoided anything he couldn't control. That night, while he showered, I scrolled through his emails. Nothing illegal, just sloppy. Hotel confirmations under fake client names, a charge from a boutique jewelry store, and a dinner reservation at the Copper Room for 2 scheduled last week when he told me he was at a networking event. I took screenshots, attached them to a folder named Receipts, and went to bed before he got out. He climbed into bed next to me, smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. "You asleep?" "Almost," I murmured. He kissed my shoulder. "You're amazing, you know that?" "Of course," I whispered. As he drifted off, I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slowly above us. I wondered if he had any idea that everything he touched, every dollar, every piece of comfort was already slipping through his fingers. In the morning, I'd meet Danielle again to finalize the paperwork, and after that, maybe I'd even buy myself flowers. The kind I actually liked. The ones that didn't die in 2 days. The first move that morning was simple. A phone call. Bernard Clark came highly recommended ex-FBI, now a private investigator with a reputation for quiet efficiency. Danielle had mentioned him over coffee last week, her exact words being, "If you want the truth without the drama, he's your guy." I liked that. I didn't want drama. I wanted proof. When he picked up, his voice was calm, steady, the kind that made you believe he'd seen everything twice. "Mrs. Barnes?" he said. "Yes, but let's keep it, Olivia." "Understood. What can I do for you?" "I need to know everything about my husband, where he goes, who he's with, what he's hiding." Quietly. He didn't ask why. That was the first sign I'd picked the right man. We met at a small cafe near the river. He arrived exactly on time, in a gray suit that looked like it had seen more stakeouts than weddings. He opened a notebook and clicked his pen. "Give me the basics." I told him about the late nights, the hotel receipts, the jewelry charge. I mentioned the prenup, the 6-month countdown, and his mother's role in the whole setup. Bernard listened, nodding occasionally, but never interrupting. When I finished, he said, "This isn't a love story. It's a plan." "That's what I thought," I said. He promised updates within the week and asked for one thing: patience. "Men like your husband," he said. "They always think they're smarter than everyone else. They make mistakes when they feel safe." That line stuck with me. When I got home, Colin was pacing in the living room, pretending to look busy. "Where were you?" he asked. "Site meeting." "Why?" "No reason." "You didn't text." "Neither did you." He frowned. "You used to tell me where you were going. Maybe you stopped asking." He opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. "Fine," he said, heading toward the bar. "I'm meeting Tyler later." "Have fun," I said, and meant it. That night, I ate dinner alone, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal you make when you've stopped cooking for someone else's appetite. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. At 10:43 p.m., Bernard texted. "He's not with his brother." "Oh." Attached was a photo Colin in the parking lot of a downtown hotel, kissing a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, young, the kind of woman who still believed charm was a form of love. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, not from heartbreak but from disbelief at how cliché he was. After all that scheming, after years of pretending to be the victim in a loveless marriage, this was his big secret? A 20-something receptionist with bad taste in men? Bernard's next text came 2 hours later. "She left around 11:30. He stayed overnight. I'll follow up tomorrow." I didn't reply. Instead, I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and let the city lights blur into a soft haze. I'd expected betrayal. I just hadn't expected it to look this cheap. The next morning, Colin came home whistling. "Morning," he said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You're up early." "Always am." "Big day?" "Every day's a big day." He smiled like he'd just fooled the world. I smiled back because it was easier than explaining that I already had the photos. By noon, Bernard called. "Her name's Kelsey Meyer. Works at a dental clinic downtown. They've been seeing each other for about 8 months. He rents her an apartment under an LLC, pays in cash. I've got everything documented." I closed my eyes and nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Anything else?" "Yeah. Your husband's drowning in debt. Over $200,000 in casino markers and personal loans. He's been paying minimums with funds from your joint account." I felt a calm, sharp kind of anger. The kind that doesn't scream but calculates. "Keep going," I said. "Already on it. I'll get you the full report by Friday." All les beaux. When I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then laughed quietly. Colin had built an entire fantasy life on my dime gambling, fake investments, a mistress who probably thought he was some successful entrepreneur. Meanwhile, the real architect of his downfall was sitting in the same kitchen he took for granted every day. That evening, he came home early with takeout sushi. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said. I looked at the boxes in his hands. "You did." "Oh, one." He smiled, thinking I meant it kindly. We ate in silence. He talked about golf. I nodded. He mentioned business ideas. I smiled. He looked relaxed, comfortable, completely unaware that his entire life was documented in Bernard's manila folder sitting in my briefcase. After dinner, he kissed my forehead and said, "You've been so good to me, Liv. I don't say it enough." I almost laughed. "You're right. You don't." He went to bed early, satisfied with his performance. I stayed in the office, reviewing Bernard's latest email, a detailed breakdown of bank transactions, credit card cash advances, and photos of Colin meeting with men outside a casino on 4th Street. By midnight, I had everything I needed. Dates, numbers, faces, proof. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was fraud, theft, deceit, all wrapped in one perfectly groomed husband. When I finally shut my laptop, I walked into the bedroom. He was asleep, breathing deeply, his phone buzzing with another message from Kelsey. I looked at him for a moment and whispered, "You have no idea how bad you just lost." Then I turned off the lamp, lay down beside him, and closed my eyes. The kind of calm that only comes when you know exactly what happens next. The smell of Vivian's perfume hit me before I even opened the front door. Powdery, expensive, and suffocating, the kind of scent that tries too hard to prove its worth. Her white BMW was parked out front, gleaming like it thought it owned the neighborhood. She was in the living room, standing by the window with a glass of Chardonnay and that trademark smile, all teeth, no warmth. "Olivia," she said, as if my name tasted bad. I let myself in. "Colin said you wouldn't mind." I set my keys on the table. "You're right. I don't." She ignored the tone. I wanted to talk about something important. You've both been under so much stress lately. I can feel the tension. I poured myself coffee instead of answering. She took that as permission to keep going, she always did. Colin told me you've been distant. That you're throwing yourself into work again. I think you might be forgetting what marriage really needs. I looked up, meeting her eyes. A prenup? Her smile wavered for half a second. Then she recovered, swirling her wine. You know, dear, love requires compromise. Colin's been patient with your career obsession. But men have needs, Olivia. Emotional, physical. If you keep pushing him away, don't be surprised if someone else fills the gap. I almost laughed. You mean like Kelsey? The color drained from her face so fast, I thought for a second she might choke on the wine. What did you say? I smiled calmly. I said I appreciate your advice. Her expression softened, but her eyes were still sharp. Good, I knew you'd understand. We all make mistakes in marriage. The trick is knowing when to fix things before they fall apart. I wanted to say, you raised him to believe love is a transaction. You built this mess. Instead, I just nodded and said, you're right, some things need fixing sooner rather than later. She took it as surrender. Exactly. See, I knew you were sensible. When she finally left, the air felt lighter. I sat on the couch, sipping what was left of my coffee, replaying every word in my head. Vivian didn't visit out of concern. She'd come to measure the ground before the explosion, to see if I was cracking under pressure. She wanted to make sure I'd break quietly when Colin made his move. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already moved first. That evening, Colin came home whistling, swinging a shopping bag from a luxury boutique. Mom said you seemed off today, he said casually, setting the bag on the table. So, I got you something. Inside was a silk scarf Vivian style, not mine. Pale cream, delicate, expensive. It's lovely, I said, touching the fabric. He grinned, like he'd done something heroic. Thought it might cheer you up. I met his eyes. You're good at cheering people up, especially the ones who think you're single. His smile froze. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said. Just an observation. He studied me for a moment, trying to read whether I knew. But years of pretending had made me unreadable. You've been weird lately, he said finally. You should take a break. We could go somewhere, just us. I'll think about it. He nodded, pretending that fixed things, and walked away. That night, Bernard emailed me the full report. It was detailed, thorough, devastating. Receipts, bank transfers, surveillance photos, timestamps. Everything that tied Colin to Kelsey and his gambling debts. But what caught my eye wasn't Colin, it was Vivian. 3 weeks earlier, she'd wired $50,000 to one of the casinos under a consulting description. 2 days later, Colin's debt with that casino was cleared. Bernard's note underneath was short. Your mother-in-law's trying to cover for him. Probably expects a return once the prenup ends. I sat back in my chair and exhaled. Of course she was. Vivian never helped anyone without expecting interest. The next morning, I went to her country club unannounced. She was sitting with a group of women in pearls and pastel dresses, pretending to be kind. Their laughter stopped when they saw me. Olivia, she said, voice too bright. What a surprise. I smiled politely. Vivian, could I borrow you for a moment? She hesitated, then excused herself from her friends and followed me outside. What's this about? I just wanted to thank you, I said evenly, for taking such good care of Colin. That $50,000 must have really helped his situation. End of quote. Her eyes went wide. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure you don't, I said. But I wanted you to hear it from me if you ever decide to send money again. Maybe write charity donation. Looks cleaner on the records. Her jaw tightened. You're bluffing. I stepped closer. You think so? Then ask Colin what he spent it on. Ask him how many poker chips $50,000 can buy when he's pretending to be an investor. Her face turned cold. You're making a mistake, Olivia. You don't want to start something you can't finish. I leaned in just enough for her to see the calm in my eyes. I already did. I walked away before she could respond, her reflection shaking slightly in the clubhouse window behind me. When I got home, Colin was in the kitchen, tie loose, drink in hand. Mom said you dropped by, he said. I did. What for? Just girl talk, I said, pouring myself water. She gives great advice about investments. Hard clue. He frowned, confused, but didn't ask more. Later that night, as the ice clinked in his glass and the TV droned on, I sat beside him, smiling like nothing had changed. Inside, though, something had clicked into place. Vivian wasn't just his enabler, she was his investor. And investors panic when they realize the market's about to crash. The next time she called, she'd sound polite again, but I already knew the truth. Her pearls were real, and so was her fear. The next Monday began like any other. Colin kissed the air near my cheek, left in his gray sedan, and I watched from the window until he turned the corner. I didn't wave. I never did anymore. The second his car disappeared, I walked straight to my office, opened my laptop, and called Danielle. It's time, I said. She didn't ask what for. I'll have Walter and the accountants ready by 10. Can you make it to the city? I'll be there. AD. By the time I arrived, the conference room looked like a war room disguised as a board meeting. Spreadsheets, legal binders, and black coffee everywhere. Walter, my longtime financial advisor, adjusted his glasses when he saw me. You're sure you want to go through with this, Olivia? Once we move these assets, it'll be hard to undo. That's the point, I said. He nodded. Danielle began outlining the plan on a legal pad. The trust would be expanded and converted into a layered holding structure, protecting every business and personal asset under one umbrella. The new parent company, Harborfield Holdings, would own everything from my downtown development projects to my stock portfolio. It sounded complicated, which was exactly what I wanted. Complexity was protection. If your husband tries to claim marital interest, Danielle said, he'd have to prove intent to defraud, which is nearly impossible unless you start transferring assets directly before divorce proceedings. I smiled. Good thing there won't be divorce proceedings anytime soon. Walter cleared his throat. We'll make it all look like strategic business restructuring, expansion to other states, new investors, new tax zones, completely normal. Danielle looked at me. This isn't just defense. It's offense. You'll have control of every piece before he even realizes you're playing. I know, I said quietly. We signed papers for 3 hours straight. My name appeared on document after document, clean, precise, unbreakable. Every signature felt like taking back oxygen I didn't know I'd lost. When it was done, Walter leaned back and said, Your company's now bulletproof. Your husband could sue God and still walk away empty-handed. Danielle smirked. Though, let's not give him any ideas. I thanked them both, left the office, and walked down the street under a cloudless sky. The city looked different that afternoon, sharper, more alive. I'd spent years letting someone else's shadow dull everything I built. Now, it all felt real again. At home, Colin was on the phone when I walked in. Yeah, babe, just got home, he said, voice light. She's doing great, busy as always. I set my briefcase down. Who's that? He covered the receiver. Tyler, we're grabbing dinner later. I nodded and went upstairs. When I shut the bedroom door, I let out a quiet laugh. He really thought he was still fooling me. That evening, I got another message from Bernard. Subject. Update. Body. He met with the same woman again today. Apartment, downtown. Also took out another cash, advanced $10,000. From your joint account. I texted back. Let him. The account won't exist by tomorrow. And it didn't. At 7 a.m., the next morning, I transferred the remaining funds into a new corporate expense pool tied to Harborfield, legally sound, business justified, and completely outside of his reach. When he logged into the old account later, I heard the faint sound of frustration from his office upstairs. He came storming into the kitchen, holding his phone. Hey, did you move the money from checking? I looked up from my laptop. Yes, for a company audit. The account was messy. Messy? He laughed, but it came out tight. That's our household account. I know. You'll be reimbursed for any personal expenses. His eyes narrowed. Reimbursed? Olivia, what's going on? I closed my laptop slowly and met his gaze. Business, Colin, you wouldn't understand. He opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. "You've changed lately." I smiled. "Thank you." He left for the gym not long after, muttering something about control issues. I watched from the window as he backed out of the driveway too fast, tires squealing. That afternoon, Walter confirmed all transfers were complete. The house technically now belonged to Harborfield Holdings. My car too. The land I bought 3 years ago outside Lexington? Reclassified as commercial investment property. On paper, I was practically a tenant in my own life, and Colin was nothing more than a visitor. I had no clue. By Friday, Bernard dropped off a thick envelope. Inside were photos of Colin sitting at a poker table, smiling like a man on vacation. In one shot, Kelsey leaned against his shoulder, laughing. In another, he was counting chips, the kind of arrogance that came right before losing everything. Bernard slid another document across the table, a summary of his findings. He's leveraged credit cards, private loans, even signed as guarantor for a friend's car lease. The guy's a walking bankruptcy case. I flipped through the report. Anything connecting my name? Not directly, Bernard said. But if he defaults, he'll try to make it your problem. I closed the folder. Then we'll make sure he runs out of problems before he gets that far. He smiled slightly. You're good at this. Building things or dismantling them? Both. That night, Colin returned home in a mood that smelled like whiskey and fear. You've been distant, he said suddenly, leaning against the counter. Is there something I should know? I turned off the faucet and faced him. There's plenty you should know, Colin. You just don't listen. He blinked. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what you think it means. He stared for a long moment, trying to decide whether to fight or back down. Then he laughed weakly. You're scary when you talk like that. I'm not trying to scare you, I said. Just reminding you what silence sounds like before a storm. He frowned. What storm? I smiled. You'll see. He didn't ask again. And as he walked upstairs, I caught his reflection in the glass door smaller than I remembered, like a man already shrinking from the truth he hadn't yet met. The empire he thought he'd inherit was gone, piece by piece, replaced with something he couldn't touch. I didn't need to scream or threaten. I'd already won. The realtor's shoes clicked softly across the marble floor as she looked around the living room. You've kept it immaculate, she said. This will go fast. I don't doubt it, I replied, leaning against the kitchen island. I want it off my hands in 2 weeks. She raised an eyebrow. That's tight but doable if we price it right. Any reason for the rush? Business relocation, I said smoothly. The company's expanding downtown. That was true. What I didn't mention was that business relocation was the perfect cover for what I was really doing, disappearing before Colin could smell the smoke from the fire he'd started. I'd already transferred the deed into Harborfield Holdings. Selling it now would look like a simple corporate asset liquidation. Clean, unemotional, legal. The realtor smiled. I'll send over the listing agreement this afternoon. Make it private, I added. No MLS, no open houses, only direct buyers. She nodded. Understood. As soon as she left, I sat at the breakfast bar, opened my laptop, and started removing personal photos from the shared cloud folder. Colin never checked it, but old habits die hard. Every picture, our wedding, our trips, the smiling moments that felt real at the time, went into a hidden archive. Not deleted, just buried. Like him. When he came home later, I was boxing up my office. He stopped in the doorway, confusion flickering across his face. What are you doing? Reorganizing, I said. For what? Space. Efficiency. You know, all the things you're not familiar with. He chuckled. You're funny when you're stressed. Then I must be hilarious. He looked uneasy but didn't press it. That was the beauty of living with a narcissist. If you looked busy enough, they assumed it had nothing to do with them. The next morning, I called Walter to confirm the timeline. Funds from the sale will go directly into the trust, he said. Colin won't be able to touch a cent. Perfect. By that afternoon, the realtor texted me 3 offers, 2 from investors, 1 from a young tech couple who wanted to move fast. I accepted theirs. All cash, 2-week close, no contingencies. The same day, Colin told me he was planning a golf weekend with Tyler. I smiled and handed him his packed bag. Have fun, I said. He didn't notice the keychain missing from the set. He took the one with the small black USB drive. I'd pulled it off the night before. Inside that drive were all the documents Bernard had collected. Proof of the affair, the debts, the forged loan agreements. Insurance, neatly labeled and encrypted. The following Thursday, I signed the closing documents. The house sold for $2.7 million. After taxes and fees, every dollar was wired to Harborfield. My name disappeared from the property record within hours. When I left the title office, I didn't feel sadness. I felt clean, like I'd just washed off the last 3 years. Colin came home that evening, tan from golf, smiling like a man with no clue. You wouldn't believe how good my game was this weekend, he said, throwing his bag on the floor. I can imagine, I said. He grinned. We should take a trip soon. Maybe Maui. You deserve it. I leaned against the counter. That's sweet. Though I might be busy for a while. The company's expanding. He frowned. You've been saying that a lot lately. What's really going on? Growth, I said simply. He studied me, waiting for more. I offered none. That night, I walked through the house one last time. The light fixtures, the polished floors, the faint echo when I spoke. It was all just furniture around a memory. I touched the wall by the staircase, where we'd once argued about paint colors, and felt nothing. By dawn, the movers had packed everything that mattered into a small truck. Files, clothes, a few personal keepsakes. No wedding photos, no gifts, just the essentials. I left a note on the kitchen island, folded neatly next to the coffee machine. The property sale closed yesterday. The proceeds belong to the company. Please remove your things by Friday. Olivia. When Colin woke up, I was already gone. I imagined the look on his face, the confusion, then the dawning panic. Maybe he'd check the bank account next, realizing it was empty. Maybe he'd call Vivian, and she'd tell him to calm down. Maybe she'd realize she'd lost $50,000 to a son who couldn't even keep his house. Meanwhile, I was downtown, unlocking the door to a furnished 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the river. Modern, quiet, mine. Bernard met me there an hour later. You're officially free, he said, handing me a final folder. He has no legal access to the sale proceeds. You moved faster than any client I've ever had. I've had practice, I said. He smiled. Most women would have confronted him. I'll dine. I'm not most women. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window. The city lights shimmered across the water, reflecting like small promises. Behind me, my phone buzzed non-stop calls from Colin, texts from his mother, voicemails from unknown numbers. I turned it off. Down below, the traffic moved steadily through the streets. The world kept turning, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was being pulled under it. The house was gone. The money was safe. The trap he built had snapped shut, but not on me. I sat down on the couch, opened my laptop, and began drafting one last message. It wasn't for revenge. It was for clarity. Because if Colin thought the silence was bad now, he had no idea what was coming when I finally spoke. The invitation came by text. Of course, Vivian never called unless she wanted to perform affection. Family dinner Saturday. 6 sharp. Don't be late, dear. I read it twice, then smiled. It wasn't a request, it was a test. She wanted to look me in the eye, see if I was cracking. She still believed I was the naive wife holding her breath for approval. Saturday came colder than usual. I wore black slacks, a cream blouse, and a gold chain. Colin once bragged about buying with my money. It felt poetic to wear it like armor. Vivian's house was everything she wanted the world to think she was. Elegant, expensive, fake. A line of candles led to the dining room, where she stood arranging silverware like she was hosting a royal event. Colin was already there, pouring wine, trying too hard to look relaxed. Olivia, Vivian said, all sugar. So glad you could join us. Wouldn't miss it, I said, stepping inside. Tyler and his wife, Bethany, were there too. Bethany gave me a soft, pitying smile, the kind that said she knew more than she wanted to. Tyler just looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. We Saturday, Vivian clinked her glass. To family, she said, smiling directly at me. no matter how difficult things get. I raised mine. To honesty, I said. It's underrated. The table fell quiet for a moment, before Vivian broke into a brittle laugh. Always so witty, dear. Tell us, how's the company doing? Better than ever, I said. Growth has been exponential. Wonderful, she said. I always tell Colin how lucky he is to have such a brilliant wife. Don't I, darling? Colin nodded mechanically. You do. I looked at him. He hadn't shaved, and there were faint circles under his eyes. He was unraveling, though he didn't know I could see it. You look tired, I said sweetly. Rough week? He forced a grin. Just busy. You know how it is. Oh, I do. Dinner was roast beef. Of course, Vivian's idea of family comfort. She prided herself on her cooking, even though it always tasted like control. She served me the smallest portion, as if making a point. I thanked her anyway. Halfway through the meal, she leaned toward me. I was just telling Bethany how marriages have their seasons, ups and downs. You two have weathered so much. It's inspiring. I smiled. Yes, storms tend to expose who built on solid ground. Tyler coughed into his napkin. Bethany dropped her fork. Colin's jaw tightened. Vivian didn't miss a beat. Exactly. And sometimes, when things get rocky, it helps to remember what's worth saving. I met her gaze and said evenly, Oh, I remember. Every dollar, every signature, every promise. She blinked, the first flicker of unease cracking through her polished shell. Then she laughed again, high and forced. You always did have such a sharp memory. Occupational hazard, I said. You can't run an empire without remembering the details. The silence that followed was delicious. After dinner, she suggested the men have brandy in the study. You ladies can handle the dishes, she said, smiling like we were in 1954. In the kitchen, Bethany whispered, Are you okay? I'm great, I said. You? She hesitated. Tyler told me. About Colin. The money, the girl. I didn't react. Then you already know he's a terrible liar. Her eyes softened. You don't deserve this. I know, I said simply. She looked at me like she wanted to say more, but didn't. When we finished clearing plates, Vivian reappeared, perfectly composed. Well, she said, I think this was a productive evening. I set down a glass. It was enlightening. Her voice dropped lower. You know, Olivia, pride is a dangerous thing. It ruins families. So does greed, I said. But at least pride doesn't ask for a loan. Her hand froze on the counter. She recovered quickly, but I saw it the twitch, the fear. She knew I knew. I picked up my coat. Thank you for dinner. The roast was unforgettable. Colin appeared in the doorway, his face tight. You're leaving already? Yes, I have a meeting early. Vivian's tone turned falsely sweet again. Drive safe, dear. You know how dark the roads get. Oh, I'll be fine, I said. I never drive blind. Outside, the air felt cleaner. I stood by my car, letting the cold sink in, watching the light from the windows flicker like a stage set behind me. Inside that house, they were probably dissecting every word I'd said. Vivian would call me arrogant. Colin would call me unstable. Tyler would stay quiet. And Bethany, well, she'd probably understand exactly what I meant. Back home, I poured myself tea and checked my inbox. Bernard had sent me something new, a recording. I plugged in my headphones and hit play. It was Vivian's voice. Crisp, cold, unmistakable. She's getting suspicious, Colin. You need to keep her calm until the prenup ends. I won't keep paying your debts forever. I closed my eyes and smiled. The perfect dinner had finally given me dessert. I uploaded the file to my encrypted drive and poured another cup of tea. The night outside was silent, but inside, every sound, the clink of the spoon, the hum of the refrigerator felt like victory in progress. I didn't need to expose them yet. Timing mattered. Revenge wasn't about explosions. It was about precision. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something new, one calm, calculated step at a time. The night started quietly. Colin was in the study, door half shut, pretending to read emails. I was in the kitchen with a glass of Pinot, scrolling through my phone while the recording of his mother's voice replayed in my head like a slow, perfect symphony. Until the prenup ends. The words weren't just confirmation, they were ammunition. Everything I needed was already in motion. All that was left was execution. At 8:12 p.m., I opened my laptop, logged into the joint email account Colin used for business, and started pulling copies of his correspondence. He was sloppy, no encryption, no aliases, just arrogance in plain text. By 8:37, I had 27 threads of proof. One showed him wiring money to Kelsey's apartment. Another was a series of frantic exchanges with a casino manager about repayment options. But the most satisfying one was a message to his brother, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject: her assets. Body: once the prenup ends, I'll move everything into the new LLC. Vivian's got the lawyer lined up. Olivia won't see it coming. I smiled. Oh, Colin, you beautiful idiot. I forwarded every email to a new secure folder, then looped in Danielle and Bernard. The subject line was simple: all evidence collected. Begin the cleanup. Oh. While attachments uploaded, Colin wandered in from the hallway. What are you working on? Work, I said, without looking up. He came behind me, peering over my shoulder. Always work. You ever stop? Not when it's important. He gave a low chuckle, the kind meant to sound playful but landed arrogant. You know, you've changed. Used to be all about us. Now it's all spreadsheets and lawyers. I looked up at him. And yet somehow, you're still surprised I know what I'm doing. Ah, wait. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said softly, I learned from the best. You taught me how to lie convincingly. He froze, then laughed nervously. You're joking. Am I? He didn't reply. He just stood there, confused, the kind of confusion that creeps in when a predator realizes he's not the only one hunting. When he finally left the room, I checked my inbox. Danielle had already replied. We've filed the motion to secure your corporate holdings. If he tries to move funds, they'll freeze automatically. Bernard's message followed right after. Casino debts confirmed. He's been blacklisted by 2 lenders. I also found his fake LLC registered under his mother's address. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it settle. Every lie, every insult, every whispered, fat pig. Behind my back, all of it had led to this. Colin came back an hour later, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. Truce, he said, handing me one. Truce, I said, taking it. We sat on the couch. He tried small-talk vacations, new car models, anything to fill the silence. I nodded, smiled, laughed where necessary. It almost felt normal, except for the tiny flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. Halfway through the drink, he sighed. You ever think we could just start over? Every day, I said. But some things don't wash off. He studied me for a moment. I don't get you anymore. That's okay, I said. You never did. Ando. He looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't know how. When he finally stood up, he said, You always think you're the smartest person in the room. I smiled. That's because I usually am. After he went upstairs, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Inside were everything Bernard and Danielle needed: recordings, emails, bank transfers, even the phone call Colin made last week trying to borrow $50,000 from a mutual acquaintance. It wasn't just evidence, it was a map of his self-destruction. By midnight, all files were encrypted and forwarded. I wiped the drive clean, tucked it into a small envelope, and slid it into my safe. At 12:03 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Bernard. Done. The banks have locked his access. He'll find out in the morning. I poured the rest of the whiskey into the sink and rinsed the glass. When I went upstairs, Colin was asleep, one arm draped across my side of the bed. I stood there for a moment, studying him, the peaceful, clueless kind of sleep that only the guilty manage when they think they've won. In the dark, I whispered, Tomorrow's going to be a rough day for you. At 7:22 a.m., the shouting started. I was making coffee when his voice erupted from the study. What the hell? I didn't move. Olivia, he yelled. The bank, something's wrong, none of my cards work. That's strange, I said, walking toward the door. Maybe call your accountant? I am my accountant, he snapped. They said the accounts are under review. What did you do? Nothing you didn't teach me, I said, and walked back to the kitchen. He stormed after me, eyes wild. You can't just take everything. Take? I turned slowly. You mean the money I earned? The business I built? The house I bought? Which part did I take, exactly? You're insane, he hissed. No, I said calmly. Just organized. Oh, one. He opened his mouth to speak again, but his phone started ringing. He looked down, Vivian's name flashing across the screen. He answered. Mom, it's gone, he said. All of it. She moved everything. I watched his face pale as he listened. Then, quietly, what do you mean you can't access it either? He ended the call without another word and stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. I sipped my coffee. Problem? He didn't answer. He just sat down heavily, the color draining from his face, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw it real fear. The empire he thought he controlled had vanished in a single night. He looked at me across the table. You planned this. I smiled. Of course I did. And for once, he didn't have a comeback. He just sat there, silent, staring at the woman he'd underestimated one too many times, the one who'd just rewritten the rules without saying a word. The morning he lost everything was strangely calm. No screaming, no breaking glass, just that quiet kind of devastation that sinks into the air when someone realizes the game is over. Colin sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone like he could will the balance back into existence. His hands trembled slightly. The accounts are frozen, he muttered. Every single one, even the business ones. I poured myself more coffee, the mug warm against my palms. That sounds stressful. I too. He looked up sharply. You did this. You and your lawyers. I shrugged. Technically, it was your creditors. But I might have nudged the timing. He laughed once short, hollow. You think you've won? You just destroyed everything we built. We didn't build anything, I said. I did. You just spent it. For a moment, he looked like he might throw the mug in his hand. Then he caught his reflection in the window, defeated, pathetic, and put it down. You'll regret this, he said quietly. You'll end up alone. I already was, I replied. He left the house without another word. I heard the car start, tires screeching, and then nothing but the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. By noon, the news began to ripple through his circle. Walter texted me first. Heads up, Colin's company account just bounced payroll. He's calling everyone. Then Bernard. One of his partners reported him for falsified investment statements. The feds will likely review within the week. Oh. I sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, watching the light change across the room. There was no thrill in it, no cinematic satisfaction, just quiet justice. Around 3, Vivian called. The ringtone alone made me smile. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again. On the 4th ring, I answered. Her voice was sharp, stripped of its usual honey. What have you done? Protected myself, I said. You've ruined my son. Your son ruined himself. I just stopped funding the sequel. She exhaled sharply. Do you realize what this means? The bank is investigating. The board's pulling out. You've destroyed our family name. I leaned back in the chair. Then maybe you should have picked a better heir. There was silence. Then softly, You're enjoying this. Not really, I said. Enjoyment implies surprise. This was predictable. She hung up without another word. That evening, Bernard stopped by with documents. Everything's filed, he said. He can't touch the assets, can't liquidate anything tied to Harborfield, and the gambling debts are formally separated from your estate. Thank you, I said, signing the last page. You did everything right, he added. Most people panic. You planned. Planning was all I had left, I said. He gave me a small nod and left. By the time the sun went down, I knew Colin was at his lowest point because he started texting things he'd never said sober. We can fix this. I just need some time. You're still my wife. I didn't reply. At 9:40, a new message came. You don't understand. Vivian's cutting me off. I have nothing. I stared at the words for a long time before typing a single line. Now you know how it feels. The next morning, I met Danielle for breakfast downtown. She wore sunglasses and a grin that could slice marble. So, she said, stirring her coffee, how's Mr.? Fat pig doing these days? Financially extinct, I said. She laughed. Beautiful. And how's the mother? Discovering that pearls don't mix well with bankruptcy. Danielle leaned in. You know, I've seen a lot of cases like yours, but never one this surgical. You didn't destroy him out of rage. You dismantled him out of principle. That's the only kind of revenge that lasts, I said. After breakfast, I walked along the riverfront, wind brushing through my hair, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not happy. Happiness was too fragile but steady, solid. When I got home, there was an envelope on the doorstep. Colin's handwriting. I stood there for a while, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won. Inside were two things: a short note and a folded photograph. The note read, "You win. I hope it was worth it." However, the photo was from our wedding, the two of us smiling, oblivious, full of promises that never meant anything. I slipped it back into the envelope and tossed it in the trash. By evening, the calls had stopped. The silence was absolute. No lawyers, no accountants, no threats, just peace. And then, one last message from Bernard. Federal audit opened. He's being investigated for misappropriation. They'll contact him by Monday. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Good. Maybe the truth will teach him something I couldn't. That night, as the rain started tapping against the windows, I poured another glass of wine and watched the city lights flicker through the drizzle. Colin once said that success was about winning over people's admiration, but standing there, with nothing left of him but silence, I realized real success was quieter. It was walking away untouched, while the man who thought he owned you tried to pick up the pieces of the life he'd gambled away. I finished my drink and turned off the light. He'd called me a fat pig, a joke behind my back, a punchline he thought I'd never hear. Now, the only thing echoing behind his back was the sound of doors closing. And as the rain softened outside, I couldn't help but think sometimes, the best revenge doesn't need noise. It just needs results. 6 months later, the world looked different. The sky over Lexington had that pale blue calm that only comes after a storm's done what it came to do. My coffee steamed quietly on the balcony of my new office 20 stories up, overlooking the city skyline I'd helped design. Colin's name had vanished from every business directory, every partnership, every shared file. What replaced it was mine. The trust was intact, the properties thriving, and Harborfield Holdings had just closed its biggest contract yet. I hadn't heard his voice in months, but his presence lingered sometimes like a ghost haunting the life he'd lost. Every now and then, I'd get a headline or a whispered mention. Reeves Development declares bankruptcy, former contractor under investigation. Local investor missing court summons. He was everywhere and nowhere. A cautionary tale. That morning, Danielle called. "You got the letter?" she asked. "Just opened it. It's official. The court granted you full ownership of all assets, no contest." He didn't even show up. I smiled faintly. Of course he didn't. Vivian's been quiet too, Danielle added. Rumor is she sold the lake house to cover his debt. Good, I said. Let her finally invest in reality. Danielle laughed. You really are something, Olivia. You played the long game perfectly. It wasn't a game, I said softly. It was math. Balance needed to be restored. We hung up, and I sat there for a while, letting the morning settle around me. I'd built my life back piece by piece, but this time, it wasn't for display. No audience, no applause, just structure, stability, silence. At noon, I went to the courthouse to finalize one last signature, the formal dissolution of the marriage. The clerk, a kind older woman with tired eyes, glanced up as I handed her the pen. You sure you don't want to wait for him to appear? He's had enough chances to show up, I said. She nodded, stamped the document, and said, You're free, Mrs. Reeves. I smiled gently. Just Olivia now. Outside, the wind was soft, brushing through my hair as I walked down the courthouse steps. Across the street, a news van idled near the courthouse lawn. The reporter didn't recognize me, which was perfect. I'd spent too many years being seen for the wrong reasons. The wife, the accessory, the fool who smiled through the humiliation. Not anymore. I drove out to the countryside that afternoon, to the small piece of land I'd bought quietly years ago before all of it. The sign at the gate still read, "Private Development." But there was no construction here, no blueprints, just open space, tall grass, and quiet air. It was my reset button. I walked across the field to where a single oak tree stood, its branches stretching wide, leaves whispering above me. I sat down under it, leaned back, and let the sound of the wind do what words never could clear everything. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost or what I'd built. I was thinking about what I'd kept: my mind, my dignity, my ability to plan even when the world tried to turn me into someone small. A car pulled up near the gate, sleek, black, familiar. Colin stepped out, looking thinner, older, the suit hanging wrong on his frame. He saw me and froze. "Olivia," he said, walking closer. I didn't move. "You found me." I wanted to talk. About what? The weather? The bankruptcy? He winced. "You made your point." "I wasn't making a point," I said. "I was reclaiming what was mine." He stared at me for a long moment, his voice lower now. "You got everything. Money, property, the company. What else do you want?" "Nothing," I said simply. "That's the difference between us. You always wanted more, even when you had enough. I just wanted peace." He looked around the open field, the quiet sky, the calm that seemed to hum in the distance. "And this is peace? This is what it looks like when someone stops caring whether you understand." He nodded slowly, the weight of it settling into him. "You know," he said, voice almost small, "I don't even remember why I called you that name. The, pig thing. I was drunk, angry, it was stupid." "It was honest," I said. "That's what made it useful." He sighed, hands slipping into his pockets. "You really don't miss me at all?" "Missing you would mean you're still part of my story," I said, standing up. "You're not." He opened his mouth, but whatever words he wanted to find never came. For once, he had nothing left to spin. When he finally walked away, I didn't watch him go. The sound of his car faded into the distance, swallowed by the wind. I stood there under the oak tree until the sunlight shifted, golden and warm against my skin. The kind of light that doesn't demand anything, it just arrives, steady and quiet. I looked out at the horizon and smiled. Not for anyone else, not for the cameras or the lawyers or the ghosts of our marriage, but for myself. Because in the end, he hadn't just underestimated me. He'd mistaken silence for weakness. And now, in that silence, I'd built something he could never touch. The empire was mine. The peace was mine. And the smile, the one he'd never seen coming, was the only thing I kept. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after lies and humiliation, this story was for you. Subscribe to the channel for more cheating stories, revenge stories, and real tales of husband betrayal that remind you the best revenge isn't destruction, it's peace. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just smile, walk away, and let the truth do the work.